Welcome, the Lord's chosen. There are people who don't think about you during the day, because daytime requires discipline. Nighttime tells the truth. Here's something most people never realize. The human brain is far more honest when it's tired. When distractions shut down, when social masks come off, when the noise finally goes quiet, that's when the real replay starts. Neuroscience backs this up. Studies on default mode networks show that the mind drifts toward unresolved emotional imprints when it's no longer occupied. Translation: whatever made the deepest dent gets the loudest airtime after dark. That's not romance. That's unfinished psychological business. And this is where things get uncomfortable. Because the person who fantasizes about you non-stop isn't doing it out of boredom, loneliness, or attraction the way movies try to sell it. No. It's far more specific than that. It's because your presence reorganized something in them. You didn't just pass through their life, you disrupted their internal filing system. You didn't steal their heart, you messed with their mental hierarchy. And the brain hates when something doesn't fit neatly back where it belongs. Here's the funny part, because there is one. While you're out here living your life, forgetting where you left your keys, eating cold leftovers at 1 a.m., and minding your business, someone else's mind is running unauthorized reruns starring you. No consent, no warning. Just you living rent-free with a director's cut they can't turn off. That's not flattery, that's impact. What makes this even deeper is that fantasy isn't about wanting someone. It's about trying to regain control. The mind revisits people who broke its sense of certainty, people who didn't react on cue, people who didn't need approval, people who left without collapsing or chasing closure. Those are the ones who linger, not because they were loud, dramatic, or seductive, but because they didn't behave the way the script demanded. So if you've ever felt, without evidence, that someone out there can't quite let you go, even though nothing happened, this is why. Some connections don't burn, they unsettle, and the ones that unsettle don't fade quietly. They stay active in the background long after the world goes quiet, when sleep should come easily, but doesn't. Number one, the person who fantasizes about you the most is someone who failed to become you. This truth is uncomfortable because it has nothing to do with romance, attraction, or even admiration in the usual sense. It's about identity. When someone fixates on you non-stop, it's often because your life, your mindset, or the way you move through the world highlights a version of themselves they never fully stepped into. You represent a fork in the road they ignored, and the mind has a strange habit of revisiting the exits it never took. They don't just think about you, they think about what your existence says about their own choices. Every time you acted with confidence while they hesitated, every time you stayed true while they compromised, it quietly rewrote the story they told themselves about who they were becoming. That gap between who they are and who they could have been doesn't disappear. It lingers, and fantasy becomes the place where they try to close it. What really keeps them stuck is that you didn't achieve something magical. You didn't get lucky. You didn't cheat the system. You simply did what they talked about doing. You followed through. You made decisions they postponed, softened, or talked themselves out of. That makes you hard to ignore, because your life feels like proof that excuses weren't necessary, just convenient. So when they replay you in their mind, it's not about desire, it's about comparison. They study how you handled pressure, how you didn't shrink, how you didn't beg for permission to be yourself. In their imagination, they place themselves next to you, trying to measure whether they could stand where you stand without collapsing. That mental exercise keeps repeating because the answer keeps stinging. There's also a quiet resentment mixed in, even if they'd never admit it. Not because you did something wrong, but because your existence removes the comfort of denial. You force honesty without saying a word. You remind them that time passed, chances were real, and potential doesn't mean much without action. That's why sleep becomes difficult. Nighttime strips away distraction, and the mind turns toward unresolved identity conflicts. And there you are, not as a fantasy figure, but as a living reminder that becoming yourself was always possible. They just didn't do it. Number 2, your presence activated unfinished business in them. Some people don't obsess over you because of what happened between you, but because of what woke up inside them. You didn't create the issue, you exposed it. You walked into their life carrying a certain energy, a way of being, a level of awareness, and it quietly pressed on things they'd buried for years. Old wounds, ignored desires, abandoned dreams, unspoken fears. Things they thought were settled suddenly weren't. What makes this unsettling is that they can't trace the discomfort back to a single moment. There was no big argument, no dramatic fallout, no obvious trigger. Yet after meeting you, something in them refused to go back to sleep. That's unfinished business. It's the internal tension that comes from realizing parts of yourself were left undeveloped, neglected or betrayed for the sake of comfort or approval. You might have represented freedom they never allowed themselves, or boundaries they never learned to set, or self-respect they postponed because it felt inconvenient. Being around you forced those missing pieces into view, and once the mind becomes aware of a gap, it doesn't stop trying to close it. So they revisit you mentally, not because they want you back in their life, but because their mind associates you with the moment things stopped making sense. You became a marker, a before and after line. Life before you felt manageable, life after you felt exposed. Fantasy becomes the place where they try to resolve what real life didn't allow them to face. They replay interactions, tone, energy, timing, looking for clues. Not about what you meant, but about what they missed in themselves. They wonder why certain feelings surfaced around you and not around others. That confusion keeps looping because the answer is uncomfortable. You didn't change them, you revealed them. There's also guilt mixed in. Guilt for not being braver. Guilt for choosing safety over growth. Guilt for staying quiet when something inside them was clearly speaking up. That guilt doesn't fade easily, especially when nothing external went wrong. There's no one to blame, no clean ending. So the mind keeps circling you, hoping repetition will bring closure. But unfinished business doesn't close until it's faced. And as long as they avoid that truth, your presence will remain active in their inner world, long after you've moved on. Number 3, they don't miss you. They miss how powerful they felt around you. Most people think obsession is about longing for someone's presence, but it rarely is. What keeps someone replaying your life non-stop is not who you are. It's how you made them feel about themselves. Around you, they weren't just interacting with another person. They were experiencing a version of themselves that only exists in rare moments. That feeling, sharp, alive, untouchable, is what they keep chasing, even when you're gone. When you were present, they sensed something they don't feel in ordinary life. Validation without effort, influence without control, the kind of clarity that makes indecision shrink. You didn't give it to them consciously. You simply existed in a way that triggered it. Being around you made them feel larger than life, like their thoughts, choices, or energy mattered in ways that normally fade into the background. That sensation was addictive, and once it's gone, the brain can't stop replaying the moments it had access to it. The frustrating part is that they aren't missing you. They're missing the mirror you held up. They're missing the confidence, the focus, the excitement of being seen by someone who demanded nothing yet reflected everything. You didn't hand them power. They recognized it in themselves because your presence made it unavoidable. When that dynamic disappears, there's a vacuum, and the mind keeps trying to reconstruct it. They replay conversations, interactions, even silence, not to relive you, but to relive how alive they once felt. That's why they can't sleep. Ordinary experiences don't compare, and nothing in their everyday life restores the intensity your presence invoked. And here's the kicker. They may never admit it. They may label it attraction, longing, or obsession, but the real truth is subtle and uncomfortable. You didn't create dependence, they discovered it on their own. They keep circling the feeling, hoping to capture it again, not realizing it was never about you at all. What keeps you haunting their mind is the fact that you exposed a version of themselves they can't reach alone. You didn't need to do anything dramatic. You just existed. And that existence left them wanting something they can't create without you. Number 4, you became their private measuring stick. Some people obsess over you, not because of who you are, but because you set a standard they can't shake. You didn't just exist in their life. You became the invisible ruler against which they measure every choice, every relationship, every moment of their own life. Your presence created a benchmark they weren't prepared for, a silent test they keep failing in their own minds, and that keeps them awake at night. It's not about admiration. It's about accountability they never asked for but couldn't avoid. Around you, the ordinary suddenly felt inadequate. Their decisions, ambitions, even the way they spoke to people, started falling short compared to the quiet example you set. That tension doesn't disappear once you're gone. It lingers because the measuring stick remains, even if it's invisible, and their mind keeps adjusting, comparing, questioning. Every interaction they had with you becomes data they can't stop analyzing. They replay the way you handled pressure, the confidence in your choices, the clarity in your words, and they measure themselves against it. Every time they come up short, the internal frustration grows. Fantasy begins to fill the gaps, giving them an endless mental rehearsal where they try to match up, to reclaim the dignity or sharpness they felt in your presence. What's fascinating is how subtle this can be. You never intended to teach, judge, or compete. You just lived in a way that required nothing from them except their own authenticity, and that alone exposed the cracks in their self-perception. They can't escape it because the benchmark isn't going away. It exists wherever your influence touched. And the more they fail to meet it, the more their mind returns to you, seeking answers they'll never fully get. In the end, you become unforgettable, not because you were dramatic or overwhelming, but because you quietly revealed what they weren't doing with their own life. That silent standard haunts them. It's relentless, invisible, and unshakable. And because it can't be erased or replicated, you stay in their mind, a constant, restless measuring stick they can't put down. Number 5, they fantasize because you didn't need them. Nothing rattles some people more than someone who doesn't orbit around them. Most people are used to attention, dependency, or validation being given freely. When they meet someone who moves through the world independently, who doesn't wait for approval, who doesn't bend or compromise to make life easier for others, it's deeply unsettling. That kind of presence exposes the gap between how they function and how someone can function without needing them, and the mind can't stop running the loop. They keep replaying you because your independence isn't just behavior, it's a statement. You didn't seek their permission, their affection, or their validation. You lived on your own terms, with your own rhythm, with your own gravity. That subtle power is terrifying to someone whose reality relies on control or influence over others. When the balance is shifted like that, it leaves a mark on the psyche, and fantasy becomes the mental rehearsal where they try to reclaim the control they never had. What's even more potent is that your detachment isn't coldness. You weren't hostile or dismissive. You were just complete in yourself. That makes the obsession silent and relentless. It's not about them being rejected. It's about their inability to affect someone who doesn't respond predictably to them. The mind keeps circling, trying to decode the unpredictability, trying to recreate the scenarios where they could bend your will, only to realize again and again that it's impossible. The irony is brutal. The very thing that makes you strong and free is what keeps someone else chained to thoughts of you. They may tell themselves it's attraction, longing, or obsession, but the real driver is powerlessness. Your lack of need exposes theirs. It forces them to face their own reliance on external validation, a truth that can't be ignored in the quiet of night. So they keep replaying you non-stop, not because of what you gave, but because of what you refused to take from them. Influence, control, or dependency. That refusal lingers longer than any interaction could, and your freedom becomes a haunting they can't escape. Number 6. They fantasize because you exposed a weakness they didn't know they had. Obsession rarely comes from attraction alone. What keeps someone's mind looping endlessly around you is the subtle way you revealed something in them they didn't even realize was fragile. You didn't poke, push, or provoke. You simply existed, and your presence made them notice cracks they had successfully ignored for years. These cracks aren't about skills, status, or success. They're about vulnerability, emotional blind spots, and the parts of themselves they didn't want to face. You became a mirror without effort. When they interacted with you, the confidence they usually projected faltered, the control they relied on slipped, and the composure they took for granted wavered. That momentary imbalance feels unbearable for the mind because it exposes a truth they aren't ready to own. They aren't as untouchable as they believed. And once a weakness is acknowledged, even subconsciously, the mind can't stop revisiting the person who triggered the awareness. What keeps them returning to thoughts of you isn't fascination. It's an attempt to regain mastery over what you quietly revealed. They replay your reactions, your choices, the way you carried yourself, searching for patterns, trying to understand how you uncovered what they couldn't hide from themselves. They want to rewrite the script where they weren't exposed, but that script no longer exists. The intensity of this effect comes from the fact that the weakness wasn't visible to anyone else. You didn't expose it publicly, you didn't make a spectacle, you didn't even intend to challenge them. You simply were present in a way that required authenticity, and that requirement forced them to confront the parts of themselves they had ignored. That confrontation leaves a mark deeper than desire or longing. It's a quiet, insidious obsession that thrives in the background, lingering long after interactions end. The mind keeps circling you because every mental replay is an attempt to restore the sense of invulnerability that was shattered. You didn't make them obsessed. You forced them to notice a weakness they didn't know existed, and the human mind hates living with unresolved truths. Number 7. They imagine conversations that never happened because they lost the moment. Obsession often isn't about what actually happened, it's about what didn't. The person who fantasizes about you non-stop is haunted by opportunities they didn't take, words they didn't say, or decisions they didn't make when the moment presented itself. Those moments linger because the mind hates unfinished business, especially when it involves someone who mattered more than they were willing to admit at the time. Every silent pause, every hesitation, every choice to stay quiet becomes a scene they replay endlessly, over and over, as if perfection in thought could somehow rewrite the past. It's not about missing you. It's about missing their own courage in that moment. Around you, they were confronted with scenarios that required clarity, boldness, or honesty. They froze, they fumbled, or they chose safety over truth. And now, Every mental replay is an attempt to reclaim the power they surrendered, a rehearsal where they imagine what they should have done. The person who keeps returning to you isn't thinking about you as much as they're thinking about how they failed themselves. What makes it relentless is that these imagined conversations feel real to them. The mind treats hypotheticals as practice, as a way to regain control over a narrative that slipped away. They rehearse dialogues, construct scenarios, and give themselves the lines they never dared to speak. In their mental world, they fix the timing, assert dominance, or finally say the things that reality forbade them from saying. But no matter how elaborate the fantasy, it's always tinged with frustration. The actual moment is gone, and imagination can't undo reality. This fixation keeps them awake at night. During the day, life distracts them, but at night, when the noise falls away, every lost moment resurfaces with a sharp edge. That's why someone who didn't act in real life can become the main character in a private, non-stop mental saga. You didn't chase them, manipulate them, or even notice the hesitation, but your presence became the stage where they failed, and that failure keeps replaying endlessly. The fantasy isn't about you, it's about the moment they can't reclaim, the words they can't unsay, and the courage they never summoned. Number 8, your calm unsettled their chaos. Some people can't stop thinking about you, not because of who you are, but because of how your presence shifted the energy around them. When they were used to a world full of noise, drama, and constant emotional peaks, your calm became a force they couldn't control. You didn't raise your voice, you didn't demand attention, you didn't push, pull, or manipulate. You just existed with a quiet, steady presence that somehow exposed the turbulence inside them. That imbalance is intoxicating and unsettling at the same time, and the mind can't let go of something it can't figure out. Chaos thrives on reaction. It survives because it triggers responses, ignites conflict, and forces people to participate in its rhythm. But you didn't participate. You didn't meet their volatility with volatility, and that made them lose footing. The usual ways they measure power, influence, or control didn't apply around you. They felt exposed in ways they weren't aware of, because calm doesn't shout, it reveals. It doesn't argue, it highlights. And that revelation lingers long after the interaction ends. That's why your presence occupies so much mental real estate. They keep replaying your demeanor, your tone, the way you handled situations without aggression or overreaction. They analyze, dissect, and imagine ways they could have disrupted it, or ways they could have made you react differently. It's obsessive because the calm they encountered is rare, unfamiliar, and fundamentally incompatible with their habitual chaos. It challenges their identity, their expectations, and their sense of control, and the mind doesn't rest until it has processed what it cannot dominate. What's even more compelling is that your calm wasn't a tactic. You weren't trying to provoke thought or create intrigue. You were just consistent, self-contained, and unshakable. That unshakability becomes haunting. The very steadiness they couldn't disturb leaves them replaying moments in their mind, trying to understand why they felt powerless in ways that had nothing to do with logic or circumstance. You didn't need to fight, argue, or perform. The way you simply existed was enough to leave them thinking about you non-stop. Calm became a silent force that unsettled their chaos, and their mind can't let it go. Number 9, they think about you because you didn't collapse under their expectations. Some people obsess over you not because you did something dramatic, but because you refused to perform on cue. They had a script for how you were supposed to act, respond, or feel, an invisible checklist they assumed everyone would follow. Around most people, that script works. They push, they manipulate, they demand, and the world bends just enough to keep them comfortable. But not with you. You didn't collapse. You didn't bend. You didn't conform to the version of reality they wanted to see. That refusal to comply unsettled them in a way that sticks long after the interaction ends. It's not about defiance in the obvious sense. It's about presence, authenticity, and integrity. You simply moved through life on your own terms, and that alone disrupted the patterns they rely on to feel in control. When someone expects you to react predictably and you don't, it leaves a gap in their mind that won't close. They keep replaying the interaction, trying to find a moment where they could have steered you, manipulated you, or forced a different outcome. But it never existed. That unresolved tension becomes obsession. What makes it stronger is that your refusal wasn't loud or aggressive. You didn't need to prove a point. You didn't need to argue or resist actively. Your calm consistency, your self-contained energy, and your unwillingness to be anyone's puppet were enough to haunt them. They fixate not on what you did, but on what you didn't do. You didn't give them control. You didn't give them the satisfaction of bending you to their expectations, and that absence feels like an unfinished equation their mind keeps trying to solve. This is why they replay your behavior endlessly. It's a mental exercise in understanding why they failed where they assumed success was guaranteed. They weren't challenged like this before. Most people fold, hesitate, or compromise. You didn't. And that makes you unforgettable. Your strength, your refusal to conform, and your independence become a private obsession for them. Proof that some things exist in life that they cannot dictate, manipulate, or possess. The mind can't let that go, and neither does sleep. Number 10, you represent a door that closed without explanation. Some people can't stop thinking about you because you left without drama, without explanation, without giving them the satisfaction of understanding why. Most closures in life are loud, messy, or dramatic. Arguments, confrontations, or long goodbyes give the mind something to file away. But when a door closes quietly without explanation, it leaves a vacuum the brain can't ignore. That silence becomes louder than any words ever could. You didn't leave a scene for them to dissect. You simply exited in a way that forced their mind to fill in the blanks. The obsession isn't about missing you. It's about the unanswered question your presence created. They go over every interaction, trying to find a clue, trying to find a sign, trying to rewrite what could have been said or done. Their mind runs simulations endlessly because the actual ending doesn't provide closure. You didn't dramatize, you didn't justify, you didn't perform for them, and that's exactly why your absence echoes. What makes it even more intense is that your exit wasn't a statement. You didn't need to explain yourself because you knew the truth didn't require justification. Your life moved forward, calmly and steadily, while they were left holding fragments of what they thought they understood. That imbalance between your quiet certainty and their desperate need to make sense of it keeps you in their thoughts long after you're gone. It's not about resentment. It's about obsession born from incomplete resolution. Humans naturally try to resolve gaps, especially emotional ones. When there's no closure, the mind invents its own, replaying moments, imagining possibilities, and constructing conversations that never happened. That door you closed silently is a permanent trigger, a puzzle that can't be solved by logic, luck, or imagination. And that's why sleep doesn't come easy for them. They are left circling the absence, the quiet, the stillness that you left behind. You didn't create drama, but you created an unresolved equation. That equation keeps replaying over and over because the mind refuses to let go of something it can't explain. And a door that closes without reason never stops calling attention to itself. Number 11. They don't fantasize about you. They fantasize about the version of themselves you reflected. The obsession some people have isn't about you. It's about the reflection of themselves that only appeared when you were around. When you entered their life, consciously or not, you acted as a mirror. You didn't just interact. You illuminated a version of them they rarely accessed. Around you, they felt sharper, bolder, more aware, more alive. That heightened version of themselves is what keeps looping in their mind, not your actions, not your presence. It's the fleeting sense of who they could be when you were there. That reflection is intoxicating because it's rare. Most people move through life in a state of compromise, settling, or distraction, barely noticing their potential. But when someone encounters you, they are forced, almost violently, to confront a part of themselves they've ignored or abandoned. Your energy, focus, or confidence doesn't just impress. It awakens dormant traits, qualities they didn't realize they had. They experienced clarity, authenticity, or courage simply by existing alongside you. Once that mirror disappears, the mind doesn't stop replaying it. It craves the version of itself it glimpsed in your presence, and that craving manifests as constant mental attention toward you. What's fascinating is that this fixation isn't about possession or longing. It's about trying to reclaim an internal alignment they can no longer reach alone. They dissect your behavior, your tone, your movements, not to analyze you, but to figure out how you triggered that version of themselves. Fantasy becomes rehearsal. Every imagined scenario is them attempting to reconstruct the mental and emotional state that briefly existed when you were present. This is why someone can obsess over you endlessly, even if nothing romantic or dramatic ever happened. You didn't leave them wanting you. You left them wanting themselves, the self that could exist only in relation to you. And that sense of loss is far more haunting than anything external. It lingers, unresolved, replaying in endless loops, because the version of themselves you reflected is a version they can't access without your presence. You didn't just impact them. You created an internal echo that refuses to quiet down. Number 12. You disrupted their sense of hierarchy. Some people obsess over you because, without even trying, you upset the internal order they rely on to feel in control. Most of the world operates on predictable rules: who leads, who follows, who wins, who loses. They are accustomed to being at the top of their own hierarchy, whether in influence, intelligence, charm, or social dominance. Then you appear, and nothing behaves the way they expect. You don't fit into their ranking system, and suddenly their sense of authority and certainty is challenged. That disruption is deeply unsettling, and the mind can't stop circling what it cannot categorize. You didn't compete. You didn't assert yourself aggressively. You simply existed in a way that demanded equal footing without demanding anything at all. That quiet assertion, the fact that you didn't submit to their expected roles, restructured their mental ranking of people around them. They were forced to acknowledge that you operated on a level they couldn't control, predict, or manipulate. That's a terrifying thought for someone who relies on hierarchy to feel secure, and it latches onto the mind like a puzzle with missing pieces. Every replay in their head is an attempt to restore balance, to figure out how they might reclaim the position they assumed was theirs. They analyze your words, your actions, your presence, searching for weaknesses, for points they could exploit, for ways to re-establish the familiar order. But nothing works. You didn't bend, flinch, or compromise, leaving their mental hierarchy in permanent disarray. That tension breeds obsession because the mind is wired to resolve imbalance, and you became the living proof that imbalance exists outside their control. What makes this even more haunting is that you didn't intend to assert dominance, and you didn't need to. Your composure, your consistency, and your refusal to be ranked or manipulated did the work for you. The disruption wasn't loud, dramatic, or deliberate. It was quiet, absolute, and invisible to anyone who didn't understand the rules of their internal system. That invisible shake-up stays lodged in their thoughts because some challenges don't vanish with time. You didn't just disturb their hierarchy. You became the standard they couldn't realign, the proof that some people operate beyond their control, and that proof keeps haunting them. Number 13. They think about you at night because daylight demands honesty. During the day, people perform. They navigate expectations, maintain appearances, and keep their insecurities tucked safely out of view. Responsibilities, distractions, and the noise of everyday life give the mind a kind of protective camouflage. But at night, when the lights dim and the world quiets, all that camouflage fades. There's no mask, no distraction, no justification. That's when honesty surfaces. And the honesty that wakes them up in the middle of the night is about you. They replay your presence not because it's convenient or safe, but because you exposed truths they ignored when the world demanded performance. You revealed, without trying, a reality they didn't want to face, the parts of themselves that were incomplete, untested, or unclaimed. During daylight, those truths can be suppressed, rationalized, or hidden behind routine. Night doesn't allow for excuses. Night asks for clarity, and when they remember you, it isn't nostalgia. It's recognition of the way you shifted their internal compass. The obsession is subtle but relentless. They go over your words, your energy, your choices, and how those things forced them to confront themselves. They aren't thinking about winning you over. They are wrestling with the version of themselves that only appeared when they were around you. You didn't instruct them, correct them, or push them. You simply existed in a way that demanded honesty. That quiet, uncompromising presence became impossible to ignore when their defenses dropped and the mind keeps circling it. What makes it so powerful is that it's private. No one else sees the internal struggle, the endless replay, the silent reckoning. It's a mental obsession born from introspection, and introspection is the hardest trap to escape. You didn't create dependency, you created awareness. You didn't inspire longing, you inspired recognition. And the person thinking about you at night is caught in a loop, trying to reconcile daylight performance with nighttime truth. They can't turn it off because honesty doesn't sleep. Your presence forced them to face it, and now in the silence of night, that truth visits them again and again. You aren't just remembered, you are a standard their mind can't escape. Number 14. If you knew who fantasizes about you non-stop, you'd realize it has nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with impact. Most people assume obsession is about desire, charm, or romance. That's the easy explanation, the one that makes sense on the surface. But the truth is far deeper and far more unsettling. The people who can't stop thinking about you aren't replaying your smile or your words. They're replaying the effect you had on them. You didn't just occupy space in their life, you altered it. You shifted their internal balance, challenged their assumptions, and forced them to confront truths about themselves they weren't ready to face. That kind of impact doesn't fade quietly. It lingers, echoing in the corners of the mind when nothing else demands attention. They think they're obsessed with you, but they're really obsessed with the disruption you caused. You exposed weaknesses they hid from themselves. You revealed courage they never claimed. You set standards they failed to meet. Their mind keeps revisiting you because you became a mirror, a measuring stick, and a benchmark all at once. They can't settle because the version of reality you forced them to acknowledge doesn't fit neatly into their old scripts. Every memory, every imagined interaction is an attempt to regain control over something they can't control. You. The intensity of this effect is amplified by the subtlety of your influence. You didn't have to be loud, dramatic, or manipulative. You didn't need to prove anything or perform for them. Your impact was quiet, undeniable, and real. That's what makes it haunting. Ordinary people come and go, leaving traces that fade. You leave a signature on the psyche, an imprint of someone who cannot be ignored. This is why sleep becomes impossible. They are haunted not by you as a person, but by the power of your presence, the way it shifted their world and revealed truths they weren't prepared to face. They revisit you endlessly because their mind is trying to reconcile the person they knew with the reality you exposed. You didn't just enter their life, you rewrote part of it, and that rewrite refuses to settle. The truth is, the people who think about you non-stop aren't haunted by attraction, charm, or fleeting desire. They're haunted by the undeniable impact you had on them, the way your presence exposed truths they weren't ready to face, the way you shifted their internal world, and the way you became a mirror for the version of themselves they never fully embraced. You didn't just exist in their lives, you left a lasting mark. You disrupted their hierarchy, challenged their expectations, exposed weaknesses, and created gaps in their reality that no amount of imagination or distraction can fill. Every thought, every replay in their mind isn't about you as a person. It's about the way you forced them to confront themselves. What makes this even more extraordinary is that none of it required effort on your part. You didn't chase, perform, manipulate, or explain. Your authenticity, calm, and self-containment were enough to leave them unsettled, introspective, and replaying memories and fantasies long after you walked away. And that is a rare, quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't scream for attention but commands it anyway, leaving an echo that refuses to fade. People who can't stop thinking about you are mentally and emotionally tangled in the truth you revealed, that being complete, independent, and unapologetically yourself leaves an imprint others can't ignore. So if you've ever wondered why someone seems to dwell on you endlessly, it isn't because of attraction alone. It's because you became an unavoidable force of self-reflection in their life, and the mind doesn't let go of that kind of disruption. You aren't just memorable, you're unforgettable. Your impact lingers, it resonates, and it quietly reshapes the world of everyone who crossed your path. If this video opened your eyes, gave you clarity, or made you see your influence in a new light, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the insights that reveal truths most people are too blind to see. Like this video, if it resonated with you, comment below your thoughts or experiences and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Every click spreads awareness, and the more you engage, the more we uncover the hidden truths that everyone else misses. Don't just watch, be part of the revelation. Stay blessed always.